Hello, and welcome to a very spooky video.
Hope I never wake up from this dream. I'ma always keep you on my team. You make me sing like...
What is up, everyone? So today I'm going to be doing this video that I've been wanting to do for quite a while. I'm pretty excited, okay? So every time I work with someone new, in the Air Force, I always ask them if they have any scary stories or like paranormal things that have happened to them, and a lot of people have stories. I think only one person that I've ever asked is just like, no, I've never had any sort of encounter or anything even weird happening to me. So I have lots of stories, a lot of stories, okay? I'm gonna try and like pick and choose the best ones, mine included. Just because I don't want this video to be like an hour long. So I'm gonna start with my stories. So there is a area near my hometown called Bloods Point. First of all, besides the creepy name of Bloods Point, it has a pretty creepy history. So Bloods Point is a very long road out in the country, and I'm from Illinois. So there's a lot of country around, okay? So there is a bridge on this road. Apparently the story goes that there was a school bus full of kids, and as they were crossing the bridge collapsed because it was wood, collapsed to the railroad tracks below it, and there were no survivors. So a bunch of kids died, including the bus driver. Now, these are all stories. I actually don't know if there's any truth to some of these stories, at least. So apparently the legend is that if you park on the bridge that's now cement at night, and if you turn your car off, then tiny children's handprints will appear on your windows and on your car. Another story is that if you park on the bridge and you put your car in neutral, that it'll be still for a few minutes, and then the kids will start pushing your car and it will start to steer as if it's going off the bridge. So when I was a senior in high school, I started working at the McDonald's that was like across the street from my high school. A lot of the people that went to my school worked there. I used to work these late shifts where I would get off at like 2 o'clock in the morning. So a lot of the times we would all get off and we would all do something. We would all like go have a couple beers or whatever it was. So a few times we would get off at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it would be like the summer, and we would decide to drive to Bloods Point, which was about a 40-minute drive, and just go check it out at like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, which, if you don't know, is the witching hour. I've also heard it called the devil's hour. It's basically just a time where there's a lot of like paranormal activity. So once I went with just two of my friends, one was a boy and one was a girl, and we went to the bridge. We parked on the bridge, you know, put it in neutral, nothing happened, there was no handprints, nothing. So we decided to just leave, and we came off the bridge and parked, and a friend of mine said that he just wanted to like check out one more thing. Now keep in mind that it's really foggy this night, and I can't remember exactly what he said he was getting out of the car to do, but he was driving and he put it in park and he was like, I'm just gonna go do something on the bridge. I don't even know. But he got out and walked to the bridge and got lost in the fog. We just were watching him, and then he just disappeared in the fog. So after several minutes, my friend and I were like, okay, we should go check on him. So we get out and we start walking towards the bridge, and we're like calling him and everything. And all of a sudden he starts sprinting out, and not at us, but just running away. So I get in the driver's seat and I'm like driving, and I'm like, what happened? And to this day, he's not told us what happened, what he saw, what he heard, if something touched him. And granted, he could have been just like fooling with us, but the look on his face was, it just made me believe him. I don't know. So another story is not really mine, but my brother used to go out there with a friend of his a lot and just like take pictures, and this was when, you know, we had flip phones, and so it's not like you can really edit them like on your phone. Well, one time they were on the bridge and they were taking a bunch of pictures. His friend showed me a picture that he had taken, and it's of two girls that were with them, and there's like an apparition moving between them. And what it looks like is, it looks like a side profile of like a little girl just kind of moving, like walking past them. You can really see facial features, hair, a dress. That's pretty creepy. So also on this road, on Bloods Point Road, there is a house. It's just the frame of the house because the house was burned down, and it is called the Witch's House. The story goes that many years ago there was 3 witches lived in this house, and they needed a human sacrifice, a baby, and so they either lured a girl from the town or, I don't know, kidnapped her, I'm not really sure. And basically they impregnated her, so apparently one of them was male. When she had the baby, they sacrificed the baby. And I don't know if they let the girl go after this or if she escaped, I'm not sure, but she did get out. When her family and the other townspeople found out, they went and made sure the witches were in their house and burned the house down. So the co-workers that I worked with at McDonald's and I went out there one time, and it was a big group of us. This was the only time I had ever been to this house. It's the only time I'll ever go. I'll never go back. We were messing around on this house frame. So basically the only thing that's still standing where this house was is the floor. The basement you can see down into, and some walls are still standing a little bit, and you can tell that it was burned down. And then you can see down into the basement, and in the basement there are pentagrams galore down there. There's a huge one in the middle of the floor, and there's some smaller ones on the walls. And yes, someone could have went down there to paint them or spray paint them once they heard these stories and wanted to make it more real or whatever. But it's weird to think that someone either jumped down, I don't know, it's kind of a far drop, so they would have had to like bring a ladder, bring paint, bring everything they needed, and they are very, very neat. So, you know, obviously it's not just like slabbed painting of some vandalism. It looks very, very neat, okay? To me, it just seems very unlikely, but I don't know. There was also a shed behind the house that was unharmed by the fire. So I do remember at one point, a friend of mine almost fell down into the like basement part, and he kept saying like, someone pushed me, and he was kind of a jokester to begin with, so we were like, yeah, right. He was just so adamant and just kept saying like, someone just pushed me. So I kept getting this really creepy feeling. Keep in mind it's like 3:30 in the morning, okay? No one's out there. It's pitch black. Nobody really has like flashlights or anything. We have like the light from our phones, and that's about it. Super creepy, just like really. So I kept just having this really bad feeling, and it just kept sinking in me that I should not be here right now. And I can't really describe the feeling. It just felt like something was telling me you should not be here. So everyone else wanted to go look at the shed and kind of check out the woods behind the shed, and I was like, I'm gonna go back to the car. I was just not feeling right. I was really, really creeped out. Even though nothing had really happened, I just had this really, really bad feeling. I start walking back to the car, and I had been walking for like a couple of minutes. Keep in mind the road is super, super long and really dark to get back to the car. So I'm walking, and all of a sudden I hear this, and I'm gonna say it was the wind, because that's really the only like logical explanation that I can come up with. What I heard was kind of like a whispering, and I'm not sure if it said anything or what it said, but it sounded like it went from this ear behind me to this ear and then just kind of floated past me. And like a second later, I felt unmistakably 4 fingers brush along the back of my neck and move my hair, and then I felt my hair fall back against my back. And my first thought was that it was someone that was in the group, you know, trying to scare me. So of course I turned around and there was no one there. So of course I ran. And even talking about that now, like, I have chills, because even when I tell that story, people are like, oh, it could have been the wind and everything. Yeah, maybe, but you weren't there. You did not feel 4 fingers brush against the back of your neck and then your hair fall back into place. So another part of Blood's Point is where the road ends, there is a graveyard to the left, and everyone has different stories about this graveyard. For one, it's extremely old. There are gravestones from the 1600s in that graveyard. It's crazy. It's really interesting. I'm sure going, you know, in the daytime would be really cool, but I've never been during the daytime, so I have no idea. So one time, me and a friend of mine were going straight to the graveyard, and it was at nighttime, and as we were rolling up, her headlights in her car hit the wrought iron fence that went around this graveyard, and we both saw a little boy standing on top of the gate, and he was just standing and holding a pole and looking straight out, didn't pay any attention to us. And right away we both saw it, we didn't say anything to each other, and then we looked at each other, and then she pulled over before we even got to the graveyard, and we both were like, yeah, we just saw that little boy for sure. So, needless to say, we turned around and hightailed it out of there that time. That was the only encounter that we needed. Another time I went to that graveyard and we went inside. It was just me and one other person, and she was kind of like far away and I could see her, but it was dark. I heard like a rustling kind of near me, and so I turned, didn't see anything. I thought maybe it was just like a bunny or something. And then I heard it again, but way behind me. So I'm like, well, that's weird. Maybe it's bunnies. I don't know. So I turn around and look. Nothing. And as I'm turning back around, I hear footsteps. Not bunny footsteps, not cat, not animal, nothing. Human footsteps come running at me from a distance behind me and come running at me. And that was all I needed. I didn't turn around to see what it was. I took off towards the car and I told my friend, like, I'm gonna be in the car. At the same time, I mean, obviously I was running, so she was like freaked out, so she ran and got in the car too, and she was like, what happened? And I told her, and her eyes just got so big, and she's like, I heard the same thing, but I was way over there and I heard something running from behind me at me. So my next story I heard when I was in middle school. A friend of mine told me this story, and there was a guy that went to our school. So for a short while he was not in school, and stories went around as to why he wasn't in school, but when he did come back, we did hear the story of why he was gone. So this guy lived in a house that they were having some really weird encounters with, and things would go flying across the room, light fixtures would fall from the ceiling, things would get knocked over, they would hear voices at night and they wouldn't be able to find anyone. So this family decided to get new carpet, and they ripped up all the old carpet, and the carpet guys went to the family and said, hey, I don't know if you guys want to see this, but there was something under your carpets. So of course they come back to the house to see what was going on, and there was a pentagram painted on each floor in every room in the house. So they were out of school because they moved houses. So my next story comes from a friend of mine from high school. I did post on Facebook like a month ago if anyone did have any like paranormal stories, and I'm only gonna read a couple of them because I did get a lot and I think they were really, really cool. But I'm only gonna read a couple of these. So this one comes from my friend Holly. So she says, so when I was like 7 or 8, I used to go to my great-grandma's every day with my mom to bring her lunch and do her laundry and take care of her. So I'm in the kitchen with my great-grandma and she's looking through a cabinet when I look into the den and see a guy sitting on the couch. He looks at me and waves, so I wave back. He's like wearing a top hat and a suit, so I asked my great-grandma who the guy sitting in the den is and she asked me to describe him. She doesn't even look away from the cabinet. So I tell him that he has gray eyes and golden brown hair and what he's wearing, and she says, oh, that's your great-grandpa. Haven't seen him in a while. Tell him I say hi. So I say hi and say I'm Holly Jean. He smiles real big and just tips his hat and then he's gone. So I look at my great-grandma and ask why I haven't met my great-grandpa before, and she just smiles and says he died a few years before I was born. I was so confused and started to freak out, but then she told me that only a few people have seen him, her, my mom, and me, and just made it seem so normal. Like, hey, you can see ghosts every now and then. Have fun. It wasn't until she passed away that I found out she was a Wiccan and super into the occult, too. But I think that is mostly because I was with my great-grandma, who apparently saw them all the time, and he also died in the house like a room over from where I was standing when he appeared. Then when I was 15, my great-aunt Dee passed away, and she was like my favorite human ever. And so when I went to bed that night after her funeral, I had a dream where I was walking with her on a beach, and she was holding my hand. She was telling me how much of a gift I have for communicating with people, and that I should never let my love for people die. It was a really great conversation, and when we said goodbye, it felt like she was really gone. When I woke up and told my mom about the dream, she started crying because she had one just like it on the beach, but with a different conversation. And that's how my mom found out I could talk to spirits just like she could. But we never really talk about it because, I don't know, sometimes it freaks me out. She says, I always hated sleeping in the dark too, because the shadow people are way more obvious at night. It's also why I sleep better with TV, sounds, or another human in the room. So my next couple of stories come from a friend of mine that I work with. Him and his family actually practice Wicca. I hope I said that right. So he said he was talking to his sister, and she had a bunch of stories. His sister said, well, great-grandma loves to move around my bunny tea set that was hers when she was still alive. Now and then I hear her calling me by the nickname she liked to use, and I hear her laughing sometimes. So then he asks his sister if their mom is up, and she says yes. And he said, can you ask her about her ghost stories, especially the Ouija board one? She says, it was too scary and I don't want you to use it. Which really intrigued me, because if a bunch of witches think a story is too scary, I want to hear this story, okay? So I did ask, I really want to know about the Ouija board story now, but if you don't want to tell me, that's okay. So he says, so when my mom was like 19, 21, she was messing around with the Ouija board with her friends, and she ended up summoning something. Stuff started moving around in the house, and she got scared and did the dumbest thing you can do with a Ouija board and burned it, which is the equivalent of burning down the door between the physical and spiritual world. She was followed around for 1 to 2 months by a spirit until she couldn't take it anymore. She told my grandma, and my grandma used a vanishing spell to get rid of it. I have personally never messed with a Ouija board, and I never will, so nobody ask. This next story comes from another sergeant of mine that I had just asked about if he had any creepy stories to tell, and a few people actually have stories about this base, but there is a base in Germany where there's a lot of ghost activity out there. So there are these large watchtowers in a lot of bases. So my sergeant was telling me that there was this one tower that was haunted because someone had hung themselves from that tower because they had gone crazy staying in the same tower for so many weeks and months at a time. So this particular tower was haunted. They kept getting alerts that there was something going on from this tower. So each tower has its own different alert. So if you hit an alarm, there's something that goes off at the control center saying, okay, this tower just set off an alarm, go see what it is. So they would drive out there. So they go up to the tower and they're just sitting there. There's nothing up there. We didn't do this alarm, I don't know. So these alarms would go off constantly every single night. So another time my sergeant was going out to this tower because an alarm had gone off. So he went out there, and when they parked, they were shouting up to the tower, flashing their flashlights, saying what's going on, and no one was coming to the windows to say anything. As they start walking up the stairs, my sergeant glanced one more time and saw someone standing there. So he shined his flashlight. Someone was still standing there. He said they didn't blink from the light or anything. They were just looking straight out. So he thought that was really weird. He mentioned it to his partner. He said, okay, let's just go up, see what's going on. They went up there, and there was 2 guys up there. They said nothing's going on. And neither of the guys that were in there was the guy that my sergeant had seen. When he mentioned this to other people, they also said that they had seen that same guy several times in that tower, and they did come to the conclusion later on that it was the guy who had hung himself up there. Another thing about that same base is that there was a phone, and they called it the devil phone. They said that it could connect to hell. This phone would always ring, and they would pick it up, and no one would be on the other line. Now, these phones out here, they don't dial out. You can't call your mom from these phones. They only call certain facilities on the base. And every night when they would be doing patrols, when they would show up to this phone, it would just be ringing. So they would answer it, and no one would be on the other line. A couple of people, I guess, said that they could hear breathing on the other line. A couple of people said that they could hear yelling, screaming, but it never sounded human. Hence the name devil phone. Okay, so I personally think I saved the best for last. So these come from my mom, who is very religious. She doesn't really believe in paranormal anything. She believes that there's very evil things in the world, which is what I believe too. So she said that nothing paranormal has exactly happened to her, but she had a boyfriend for a long time, way before we were born, that lived in a house that had a very sinister history that she didn't mention to me, so I'm not sure what exactly it was. But he lived in a house with 2 roommates, and things were always happening to all 3 of them, and they only lived there for a couple of months because it was just too much for them. So one of the things is that while my mom was there, there was no one in the kitchen, and an iron, like an iron that you iron with, was thrown across the kitchen and landed on a cabinet and dented the cabinet. So they heard this loud noise, and they went in there and realized what had just happened, where the iron was to begin with, and then where it was across the room. And she said that that was when her boyfriend at the time started telling her a lot of weird stuff had been happening in the house, and that he was getting really scared. Another thing about this house, and this is really sad, so sorry, the female that lived at this house had a dog, and the dog was young, didn't have any health problems, and one day they came home and the dog was found dead in the yard, and there was seemingly no cause for the death. My mom did say that she always got a really creepy feeling in that house, and it just felt very dark and evil in that house. Needless to say, they only lived there for a couple of months, and the house is now, they can't rent it out anymore, no one can live there, so now they turned it into like an insurance agency, and no one can be there at dark because that's when a lot of creepy stuff happens. Speaking of that, I will add in a little bonus story. Growing up in Rockford, Illinois, we are about 40 minutes outside of Chicago, and there is a house that's along the river that's in Rockford. It's called the Rock River, and one of them specifically was one of Al Capone's houses that he lived in. This house is apparently so haunted that no one can be there at night, same with the other house, because so many bad things had happened to people and dangerous things had happened to people when they were in the house past nighttime. So I do know that some of the stories are people moaning, crying for help, chains dragging because he would keep a lot of people prisoner in his basement if he was trying to get information out of them or they were an enemy of his. There is also a sort of chute in the basement, kind of like a tunnel that they found that goes into the river. Al Capone used to put the bodies that he had killed down this chute, and it would go straight into the river. And when they discovered this many years before I was born, they did find lots and lots of decaying bodies in the Rock River around that area that they deemed were victims of Al Capone. So I saved the best for last, not to scare you guys too much. When my grandpa died, my mom's dad, we sold his house, and we sold it to a nice couple that planned on renovating it and then selling it. One of the things that my grandpa really loved to do was to cook. So one day, just a few days after they had moved in, the woman was cooking and she was stirring something in a pot. And she told us that she felt a very warm, welcoming presence come up behind her and help her stir the pot. In the same day, she also told my mom, who just actually told me this story recently. She said that she didn't want to kind of tell me these stories a long time ago. She doesn't like to invite that sort of stuff into her life, which I totally agree with. I get it. One night, the couple that lived in my grandpa's old house were upstairs and they heard a door slam from downstairs. So they went to go investigate, and it was the basement door, and it had slammed shut. And there were no windows open, no doors, no sorts of drafts, nothing from the basement, from the upper level, nothing at all. Now, when they told my mom this story, she said that she got kind of scared because she had never told this couple this. The one door that my grandpa would slam growing up was the basement door, because if you just smacked it closed, it wouldn't close all the way because it had like a stop, and then you had to like turn the handle and push it closed. But if you slammed it really hard, it would just close. She said that my grandma hated it. She was always telling him not to slam the basement door. But my mom said that one of the memories that she had growing up was my grandpa was always slamming that basement door. So those are all the stories that I have for you guys. I do want to put out that my belief is Christianity, and I believe that there's a lot of evil in the world, but there is also a lot of good in the world. And if there are spirits lingering or signs given to you by loved ones, I definitely believe in that. But I don't believe in purgatory. I don't believe that there is anywhere that you go when you die besides heaven or hell. That being said, it could have definitely been my grandpa in the house, but I have watched enough scary movies and have seen and researched enough paranormal situations that I know when loved ones pass away, that evil sort of comes to those that are very vulnerable and broken and tries to do things that make you think that it's your loved one, like slamming the basement door or cooking. Once those spirits are invited into your home, best believe you're gonna be like reliving The Conjuring, okay? Be careful. I kind of tried to scare you there a little bit. I hope it worked, because this is supposed to be a scary video, you know? Alright guys, thanks so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope it scared you, honestly. Happy Halloween. I hope you guys have so much fun. I hope you get scared and spooked and scream and get lots of cavities and candy and just have a grand old time.